Hello, I'm Barbara Gonmuller, and you are in for the magic of connection, the magic of making a team more powerful with each of you bringing your best to that team. Today, we're going to interview Jennifer Cahill. You know, when I met her just recently on a Visioneers meeting, I said, she's got the magic we've been looking for. How do you connect with one another? And so today you're in for a treat. Jennifer Cahill, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Barbara. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and your audience. I appreciate your time.
Well, you know, it is about time. And how do we make the best use of our times when we're in a meeting? How can we become our full potential that God created us to be? And so I'm going to begin with a brief interview of her background and then a brief 3 questions. And so you'll be able to bring this to your audience itself and maybe invite friends to listen to this and say, what can I do now? Because that's the purpose. ourpeacepodcast.org, with me as your host, Barbara Gunn-Mueller, has been on for many years. Why? Because each of these 15 to 20-minute pieces give you the motivation to explore more. Go to their websites, pay attention to what they're trying to teach you and help you become more of who you were created to be. So Jennifer Cahill, you're an entrepreneur, an executive coach, and a speaker with over 20 years of experience. She exited her first company in 2018. That makes me think about people who go into bigger and better things sometimes when we exit our companies. And so that's why she appeared on BBC News, ABC, NBC, Fox, and E! News. And she's quoted in Ladders and Glassdoor. So you think about how could this woman do so much? So then she joins a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle. Hill has hosted a 17-part series with Deepak Chopra, my dear friend, and Don Hoffman, entitled Conversations at the Intersection of Cutting Edge Science and Spirituality, which can be found on Humanities with apostrophe S stream, which I checked, Jennifer, right before I got on today. I said to Jennifer before we started our conversation on the recording, I don't know what I'm going to do now, Jennifer. I don't know if I have enough hours in the day to absorb all your wisdom. So let's just go right to your first question. How can we connect more meaningfully to ourselves first and then to others? And with that, I'm going to put you on speaker view because I want to show all of you, and we will do that in right now. Let's start. Thank you, Jennifer, again for being here.
Oh, my pleasure, Barbara. Yes, human connection has been both elusive to me when I was very young. I had very few friends. I didn't know how to make friends or keep friends, and was quite frankly suicidal, depressed, and felt like an outsider and like I didn't belong most of my young adult life. To me, Barbara, it was like you got a book on how to be a human being, and he got a book on how to be a human being. Yet when I opened my book, it was blank inside. And so this unfortunately led to decades of misunderstandings, breakdowns in communication, and heartbreak and heartache for myself and others. And I have made it my life's work over the last several decades to study people and to understand what would clear communication look like? What would a meaningful relationship look like? And I remember about 6, 7 years ago, I was going through a divorce, and one of my best friends gave me the best piece of advice anybody's ever given me. She said, Jen, you deserve to find somebody who will cherish you, though first you need to cherish yourself. And so that's where it begins, is with that connection to self. It's something I call the golden triangle of connection. You see, we have this connection to ourselves, which is one part of the triangle, one corner, connection to others, and then, of course, the top of the triangle being connection to purpose. But just like a house of cards, it all falls over if first we're not meaningfully connected to ourselves. Most of us are playing out dramas and traumas from our childhood in all of our relationships, business, friendship, romantic relationships. So, what I teach people is to turn within and develop an internal relationship. I was doing another podcast recently and I was going through my morning routine, and I often get asked, well, what's your routine? And mine's pretty robust. I do spend about 2 hours a day in meditation, reflection, prayer, journaling, among other things. And so the other gentleman who was interviewing me said, well, Jen, a lot of our listeners and viewers are a little concerned. They don't have 2 hours every day, to pray, meditate, connect. And one of my favorite, simplest tools to do this is heart focused breathing. I use it with all the CEOs that I work with. I'm a CEO myself of a company. I use it in my own business. I use it with the CEOs that I work with. Heart Math, who I love and adore. Do you know the folks at Heart Math, Barbara? Are you
Yes, I
familiar with?
do. I love heart math.
Oh, me too. I learned their work about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was transformational. So even if you say, oh, I don't have time to meditate, or I don't have time for inner child work, I love to use heart focused breathing, because what that does, Barbara, is as human beings, we have these 3 parts to our brain. I recently wrote an article about this on LinkedIn that I shared, and it's on our website on om.app. And what we talk about is that we have the lower part of the brain, which you often hear talked about, the amygdala, the reptilian brain, the fight and flight and the survival brain. Then you have the mid part of the brain, which is the mammalian brain, the are you safe? Am I like you? Can I trust you? And then you have the highest part of the brain, which is the neocortex, the executive functioning, our creative ability, our ability to connect deeply and to think about new ideas. And what most people don't know, Barbara, is that if the lower parts of the brain don't first feel safe, then the higher brain can't function. So
Mm.
that's why I'm such a huge proponent of heart math. There are so many modalities. I could give you 183 tools right now. I literally think you autism. I got diagnosed being autistic a few years ago. I literally have 183 tools that I use on myself and other people to keep myself in what heart math would call a state of coherence, which is actually a physiological state, which means that we're accessing our higher brain functioning coming from our heart, which has its own brain. And I share
Did
this
you
because
say state of content?
state of coherence, a higher state of.
Coherence, because that state of coherence is where you achieve the epiphany of what you need to do.
Yeah, that again connects us to the purpose, which is the higher part of the triangle. So as you can see, it's all really interconnected here. And I love it because I personally love inner child work. I do that every day. A lot of people have families and jobs, and I honor exactly where everybody's at. That's why I like heart focused breathing, because you can do it with your eyes open. You could literally be frustrated, upset in the middle of a meeting. I've been there, done that. I remember one time I was on a call with my co-founder of the current company, and they said something, and all of a sudden I was like one of those characters, Barbara, with steam coming out my ears, and you could boil an egg or scramble, fry an egg on my head. I was like a cartoon character. And I was like, oh, this would be a really good moment for heart focused breathing. So nobody even has to know when you're in the middle of an upset. You can do it with your eyes open, and you breathe slowly and deeply in and out through the center of your heart. And that literally regulates your nervous system, tells the amygdala, it's okay, we're safe here. And then you can be responsive rather than reactive. And that's the secret to human connection, Barbara, is that when we can be responsive rather than reactive, number one, first and foremost to ourselves, because we are our own worst critic. When I tell people, Barbara, that I was a recovering jerk, it's because I was so cruel to myself. I grew up in a verbally abusive household where often I was told, you're stupid, you're worthless, whatever it was. And I internalized that for decades until I began doing the work. And so once we do that, though, then you can repattern and reprogram and learn to be responsive rather than reactive. Say you make a mistake. God bless my mom. I love her. We talk every day. And sometimes she'll say, oh, Jenny, I'm so stupid. And I'm like, Mom, I love you, and I will not allow you to speak that way about yourself. Please say cancel, cancel, and say something different, because we all speak that way to ourselves all the time.
That's the hardest part of living together. When other people are saying things that they are not healing their bodies and keeping their bodies in harmony with the thoughts that they have. And so I loved what you said. Just begin with, let's just begin with this. You said, cherish yourself. But that just doesn't happen because you say, I want to cherish myself and love myself. It happens when truth and insight begin to get together. Isn't that true?
Yeah, and that's what leads to a more peaceful world, Barbara. That's what this whole podcast is about. Is I think if we taught the whole world heart-focused breathing and inner child work, we would have a peaceful world.
If we taught the whole world how to cherish themselves. You know, I was married to Robert Mueller. And when I was married to Robert Mueller, I wrote 20 journals, which my son recently brought to me after being away from them for about 15 years. And I realized I was so prolific because Robert cherished me. He cherished me with love letters. He cherished me with his passion. He cherished me, and I cherished myself. And I reflected this joy that I felt through being cherished and cherishing myself. Also, living in Costa Rica in an old cabin with no interference from cars, trucks, or the internet. I didn't even have a TV and I didn't even have a stove, but we had each other and I was prolific. I felt like I'm living on this sacred mountain and I'm able to write how I feel and I'm able to bring out the wisdom. So does that have something to do with it too?
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. It's the deeper wisdom. You actually touched on something very important there, Barbara, which is quieting the noise. It's a quiet mind that's an open mind for connection to self and others. When we quiet all of the noise, whether it's the noise of media, social media, the outside physical noise, such as dogs, cats, children, cars, whatever it is, if we can just sit, no matter where we are and how noisy it might be, and just quiet the internal noise and find that stillness inside, then all of a sudden, it's from that place we begin to hear the echo of our heart, the song of our soul, and the things that we long to do, the connections we long to make. Though so many of us live our whole lives and we never get to hear that still sweet whisper that is constantly longing to connect with us, yet we're too busy with our minds to be able to hear it.
You're bringing tears to my eyes because you're hitting me in my heart. And whenever somebody hits me in my heart, my eyes get watery. Why? Because I know you're telling the truth. And so when you get this human connection, what does that have to do with peace? You know, think about it. Our human connection with ourself and the others, and talk about that because that's peacepodcast.org is for harmony, introspection, mutually assured survival, and happiness.
Hmm. For me, Barbara, and I can only speak for myself, what this means to me is that when we have a deep, meaningful connection to ourselves, we become resilient. And I find that wars are created and basically constantly fought because the fact of an internal war within ourselves. I've been using this analogy a lot lately, so I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. There was a particular day, like a week and a half ago, where I was having a wonderful opportunity for my growth and development. I try not to call things challenges, I try to call them opportunities for growth and development. And I was at a fabulous hotel, I say somewhat jokingly, in Milan, a five-star hotel. And I get there the first night, it's 90 degrees, and I'm there for a spiritual retreat that's across the street. And that first night, you know, you're at the retreat the whole day, so you're not in the room. And we go to bed, and something weird happens. There's no AC. The AC does not work. And so the whole, night, my husband and I can't sleep. We're tossing, we're turning. And you know how you don't get a good night's sleep? And you are not necessarily as peaceful as you would normally be. This is also a contributor I've noticed for myself is if I've slept well enough, if I've drank enough water, if I'm meditating and doing all the good things, then I'm able to be resilient and my highest and best self and to respond responsively rather than reactively. Well, by the end of that weekend there, then the AC finally gets fixed, but now it's Antarctica in there and it won't turn off. It was like almost a comedy of errors.
You
And
became
as
a popsicle.
yeah, so then I'm a human popsicle, and it was like almost laughable. It was like you're just laughing at this point. And so I was feeling a bit frustrated. So on the plane ride back from Milan to Lisbon, my husband and I are like, oh, let's watch like a movie. I don't really get a lot of downtime. I don't watch TV often. Normally Friday night I might watch a movie, but here we are on a plane. So I was like, let's watch a movie. And it's a funny example, but there was a movie called Dungeons and Dragons that came out in 2023. And it's a movie with Chris Pine and Hugh Grant. And the point of this is part of the movie, spoiler alert, is that there's a sorcerer and he is the world's worst sorcerer. He is the only sorcerer that they can get to like save humanity. And he sucks. He cannot cast a spell. He can't help, but he's the only one they have. So he has to align with the special helmet. And in doing so, he has to face his greatest foe, which is his great great grandfather, who really was a prolific sorcerer. And every time he puts his helmet on, he's fighting and then battled and trying to destroy this other sorcerer, but he can't do it. And then all of a sudden, something hits him, Barbara, and he sees that the other sorcerer is not his great great grandfather that he's been fighting with all along. It's himself.
Mm.
And that really is the crux for me of peace in the world and human connection. If we can realize that anybody we're fighting with out there, like I'll put that in air quotes, out there, is really a reflection at some level of ourselves, why would we fight with them? Would that not in and of itself create peace? Yet to get there, it requires number one, quieting the noise. Number two, connecting to self. And number three, then allowing that thread of connection to connect to others.
I can't even say anything that is so powerful right now to hear those 3 steps to awareness. You know, I've said these podcasts are about awareness. Once you are aware, you can't go back. Once you hear Jennifer, you can't go back. You now have the power to go forward and bless that power that you now have. And to see that movie when you never expected to see that movie, there are no accidents, that everything is higher power, for want of a better way to describe it, described in spirituality. Teilhard de Chardin would say, you have discovered the power of fire when you discover who you are. As would say, and my late husband, Robert, I just have to just thank the universe, the higher power, for putting me together with Robert. What was the chance? He lived in Costa Rica. I lived in Santa Barbara. What's the chance of him coming to the invitational? And then all of a sudden I see he cherished me from the moment he met me, and I cherished him. And everybody would say, why are you two always together? And I would say, we're not sure, but we're like a magnet. All we know is we can't separate. And so for the next 17 years, I spent with Robert Mueller. So how does personal resilience affect and bring about a more creative and meaningful connection with ourselves and others? You talked about that in your talk, but why don't you give us a few, now do this, our breakthrough.
Yeah, so going back to my example of not sleeping well in Milan and being more reactive, when we have tools for self-regulation, again, going back to the 3 brain system in the amygdala, most of the reason, pretty much the only reason that we get upset and fight with one another is that our amygdala is running the show. I like to say it's akin to this, Barbara. It's like you have a beautiful carriage. Imagine this carriage is you, and you have this carriage and the biggest, most powerful Clydesdales that you could ever imagine, gorgeous horses, and there's nobody sitting in the driver's seat. So your consciousness is like the horses. If you don't put
It can
somebody
go anywhere.
yeah, it could run right off a cliff, and they're
Right.
very powerful, right?
Yeah.
And yet by building and fostering resilience in ourselves, using breath work, meditation, inner child work, again, any of the number of tools. I was just using another tool on myself today, another brilliant one that I love called the Sedona method. I use it for myself. I use clients. Do you know Hale Dwoskin's the Sedona method?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great one. Where
Yeah.
you just simply ask yourself, let's say something frustrating happens to you. Let's say somebody cuts you off in traffic or is a jerk to you or says something unkind about you on social media. You go through these questions that you ask yourself, could I simply welcome that the person cut me off in traffic? And I do it for myself, but you can also have a friend ask you these questions. And then the person will say yes or no or whatever they feel. And then you just tell yourself thank you, or have the person tell you thank you. Could you simply allow that the person cut you off in traffic? Could you release that they cut you off in traffic? Would you release that they cut you off in traffic? And when will you release that they cut you off in traffic? One of my best girlfriends, Jules, we do kind of, for lack of a better word, like coaching, mental health and loving support for one another. We met in a personal development class about 8 years ago. And Jules and I do this for each other every week, where we'll call each other and we clean the glass, as she calls it. So that way you can see yourself in the world clearly. And if you don't have these tools for resilience, then chances are you're just going to be adding one frustrating experience after another, if you don't clean the glass between you and the other people that you live with, work with, are friends with, and even my husband and I every night say to each other, did I cause you pain? And every night before we go to bed, we say, did I cause you pain today? And
Oh,
not
that's
only,
so beautiful.
yeah,
It's
and we
so
talk.
beautiful. You know, Robert and I would have moments when we disagreed. And I would say, well, Robert, maybe that's the way we move forward. And he would say, what does that mean? And I said, I don't know. Let's just explore. I don't know. And that's the last step of my revolutionary conversation. Stop. Don't go forward until it's safe. Help, ask, risk. I took a risk and I said, let's explore. Let's explore. I don't know why we were disagreeing. It was a simple thing like a copy machine. And then we would have this conversation and end up hugging because our love was more powerful than our disagreement. And we would
Mm.
end up resolving it. So, talk about the connection in your life and how we can bring this forward. I want to hear a breakthrough for our audience. And then I'm going to thank you. And I'm going to have our audience ask questions of each other so they can hear where they're coming from, because you have to start with that. And I'll give you a real close example that just happened. I said to a person, I said, you know, I'm working on Ending War 101. She went ballistic on me. I mean, I couldn't talk to her. I hate war, but I never want people to be murdered, and neither do I. So then the next person, when I went up to them in a kind of a strange situation, I said, you know what the world is crying out for? The world is crying out for peace. What can we do? Then she opened her heart. She didn't open up that part of the brain that is, I can't take this anymore. This is what I'm going to do. She opened up her heart and she said, this is exactly what I want. I want peace on the planet. And so then I got my conversation started. Jennifer, I'm sorry I had to tell my story, but I wanted to ask you again,
Apologize.
again, this meaningful connection is what I want people to have.
So my recommendation, if you're feeling disconnected, as this loneliness epidemic is hitting an all-time high, 24%, according to a recent Gallup poll of people surveyed, not just in the United States, but Barbara, across 142 different countries, people are expressing feeling very or fairly lonely. My recommendation is to date yourself, marry yourself, fall in love with yourself, find out what lights you up. Ask yourself every day, just like I do with my inner child, how are you feeling today? What do you need? When you turn those questions within, then all of a sudden you're no longer trying to take energy from your friends, trying to get validation, or from the news or social media. When you ask and you go internally and you say, how are you feeling? What do you need? From that place, you become the most powerful, loving, peaceful person alive.
With that, I thank you. Again, you brought tears to my eyes. It's because I've been reading my journals and listening to you at the same time and feeling this power of love. I think if we could replace the love of power with the power of love, as we've heard in the Beatles songs, then we would have a world that works. And to get to that place where you feel that power of love is exactly what you said. Ask yourself, how am I feeling now? And how can I help you? How can I cherish me? I ran several boards that were in disharmony. And I just sat there in my love for me and in my love for each of them. And we ended up, after a year of working together, in harmony. And it's because I was resilient through my own self, not through books or magic. It was me. I stood in that power that we get when we practice what you're talking about today.
Beautiful, Barbara. That's my wish for every one of us. May we all go out and connect more deeply to ourselves, to others, and our purpose.
To connect more deeply with ourselves and with others is my dream. In fact, when I met you, I said, here is a visioneer, a person of great vision and a person of great knowledge. Put those two together and you get Jennifer K. Hill. And I am just so delighted to bring you to the audience and to let people hear how they can connect to themselves and then connect to each other. Jennifer, let's go back to your website because people are going to be very inspired and want to know more. Would you tell us what website we should go to, or did you give me two?
Yeah, I gave you two. One of them includes the media links to a lot of the other interviews I've done. om.app is our main website. We actually created a software that connects people utilizing everything I've learned for the last 20 years. And you can even try our survey. It's free online there. And it is my dream that we all learn to just have greater compassion for ourselves and for one another. And the fact that we're motivated differently. That's what I've been studying now for the last several years, is how if my motivators and your motivators are different, it could cause an accidental adversarial relationship. So our goal is to repair that and to enhance trust in all relationships.
And I thank you. The world thanks you. And we cherish you. I feel the power of love as I look at you and as I listen to you. An audience, many of you have been new to this Peace podcast. I'm getting 5, 6 emails a day from people who want to join our group. And one of these days, I want to hear from you. So send me what you think we should be talking about and invite a friend to watch this podcast. This is a very powerful opening for you who are watching today. And I thank you for giving us your 20, 25 minutes. And I thank you for being more peaceful and spreading the word love into those situations that need it. And with that, I thank you, Jennifer. I thank you again. And blessings to all. Remember, peace is possible. And I love you. Bye for now. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you, Barbara.
It's my pleasure.